Welcome to the Clear View of Quilting. I'm Marci Baker of Alicia's Attic. Today I'm going to share with you how to join the ends of your binding so that no one can tell the last seam from any other. So here I've made up a sample quilt. I have my top, my batting, and my backing, and I've started applying these strips to the quilt. At the beginning I leave a tail of 8 to 10 inches and I backstitch and apply the binding to the quilt. And I would miter the corners and come around, and the other end I will stop about 8 to 10 inches away. The more space you leave here, the easier this is going to be. And I leave a tail of about 8 to 10 inches. So we have those. Notice that this binding is not folded in half. I don't pre-fold my binding because it turns out that whenever you're working with your binding strips and applying them, you need more fabric on the outside than you do on the inside. And if you've ever found that that fold that you've put into it didn't fall right where you expected, it's because you're going to have more fabric on the outside of your binding than you are on the inside. Another thing, I vary my strips depending on how thick my batting is. This batting is only an 1/8 inch thick, and I'm doing a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I want a finished 1/4 inch on the front and on the back. So this is a 1 3/4 inch wide strip. So we've got our binding applied and we've got our ends. We've left open 8 to 10 inches. Now we're going to find that point that matters. And I'm going to put the strips right sides together. Notice that they're open, not folded in half. And I'm going to find a point where these match up about halfway between my two ends, and that I'm not so loose that I'm away from the quilt, and I'm not so tight that I'm pulling up either end of my binding, but just where the binding falls nice and neat along the quilt. And I have a critical point that I'm going to pin. That critical point is my seam allowance in. So if I'm doing 1/4 inch, it'll be a 1/4 inch in where those two match. And I'm going to pin that in place. So I'm going to pin the point, that critical point, and I'm just going to catch a couple of threads on this side and a couple of threads on that side. And that I'm going to be able to sew together. So now we have that critical point pinned, and I'm going to take and lay this out, and you have to bunch up the quilt here. Let me see if I can do that. You can see. I'm going to bunch the quilt up, and I'm going to lay one strip flat, and I like to work on a table when I'm doing this, and then I'm going to take and twist this other end around so that I have these two strips laying on top of each other and that they're flat. Once I get it so that this is flat and this is flat over here, I'm going to be sewing from where these two edges cross to where these two edges cross in a straight line. And it turns out it doesn't matter if I get an exact 45. I could even do this right here where I twist them back a little bit. But what I'm going to need to do is pin this, and I'll take 2 pins and pin it this way. And now when I sew from this point over to this point, I will be going through my critical point. That critical point means this is going to fit. Let me go ahead and sew that. So I've sewn those together, and here you can see I made sure I stitched from where those two cross to where those two cross, and my critical point was about there, but I had to pull that pin out so I didn't stitch over it. And I'm going to check, before I cut these, I want to make sure that it is going to fit. So I just take this and fold it, or just pull it, and I can see that that is going to lay nice and neat on my quilt top. So now that I know it fits, I'm going to take and trim this to a 1/4 inch. I'm going to press that seam open, and I tend to just finger press it. And now that folds over and fits, and I'm ready to stitch that down. That's how to join your binding so you can't tell that last seam from any other seam, and we did it without a ruler, without a lot of measuring, just a couple of pins.